When the WNBA Players Association announced a 97% strike authorization vote, headlines lit up. But beneath the surface, something didn't add up. Caitlin Clark wasn't marching. Angel Reese was talking championship matchups. Paige Buchers was still filming endorsement spots, while Nike was finalizing plans for Clark's Super Bowl shoe drop. Behind the scenes, top players were already moving like the season was.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
The strike talk? More ritual than rebellion. As the video reveals, that near-unanimous vote wasn't about stopping the season. It was a bluff aimed at salvaging leverage in a game that had already moved on without the union. The second players like Clark and Reese made it clear they were playing. The union lost control of the narrative. Sponsors weren't backing out, fans weren't worried, and a media blitz was in full swing. This isn't a fight over whether the league survives. It's a battle over who calls the shots. With Nike's money and the league's 5 biggest stars pulling in one direction, the season is a lock. What's in question now is the relevance of the union at all. This video lays out how the strike collapsed before it began, and why the future of WNBA labor politics may be decided without a single vote cast. Caitlin Clark just shut down the WNBA strike, and she did it without ever using the word strike. One post, 10 words. Both are welcome courtside this year. And suddenly, months of union posturing, media speculation, and bargaining threats unraveled. Because that wasn't just a caption. That was a signal. Caitlin Clark was telling the world, fans, sponsors, and yes, the WNBA Players Association, that the 2026 season is happening. And that message, it hit harder than any union memo. This whole labor standoff started when the WNBPA threatened to strike ahead of what was supposed to be a landmark season. The players had authorized a strike with a stunning 97% vote. But that number, while flashy, wasn't what it seemed. It wasn't a war cry. It was insurance. Symbolic, strategic, and ultimately powerless. Because while the union was busy flexing its muscle, the league's most important players were quietly making other moves. Moves that said, we're not sitting out. We're not boycotting. We're suiting up. Caitlin Clark's post was just the beginning. Angel Reese followed suit, talking playoffs, championship goals, and season prep with zero hesitation. Sabrina Ionescu, Aya Wilson, Paige Buchers. Every key figure started operating like the season was locked in. No ambiguity. No fence sitting. And that's when it became clear. The power dynamic in the WNBA had officially shifted. Because the union might have votes, but these players have influence. Cultural capital, corporate backing, they're the product. And when they decided to break ranks, even subtly, it took the air out of the strike narrative. What we're seeing now isn't just a breakdown in union strategy. It's a realignment of power in professional women's basketball. The WNBPA was prepared to play hardball over a proposed 700% pay raise. But the real power to shut down, or greenlight, the season didn't lie in union hands. It never did. It belongs to the players, and the money behind them. Nike's involvement in all of this cannot be overstated. The brand didn't just sponsor Caitlin Clark. They built a multi-million-dollar launch campaign around her. Her signature shoe is scheduled to debut during the 2026 Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, that alone says everything. That kind of rollout doesn't happen unless you're certain the season it's built on is happening too. Nike doesn't operate on uncertainty. That shoe release is locked, advertised, and budgeted. It's a commercial commitment that signals the season isn't just expected, it's essential. So when the union tried to leverage a strike, Nike had already financially sealed the season's fate. And when Caitlin Clark posted that courtside caption, that was a green light, not just to fans, but to everyone watching the league's labor battle unfold. It told them, we're going forward, strike or no strike. The WNBPA's 97% vote was supposed to be their big card, a way to show unity and strength. But behind that number is a complicated truth. Players voted yes not because they were all in on a strike, but because they had to, out of survival, out of loyalty, out of peer pressure. It's how these things go. But when push came to shove, when it was time to speak not just as union members, but as individuals with massive platforms and even bigger commercial stakes. They chose business. They chose basketball. And who can blame them? This isn't a normal year. This is the most anticipated season in WNBA history. Clark's full-time debut. Reese turning critics into believers. Buchers entering the league. The rivalries, the fan attention, the brand deals, everything is peaking. Sitting that out isn't a bargaining tactic. It's a career risk. The players know that. The sponsors know that. The fans definitely know that. Which is why the union's threat never really landed. Without the support of the players who drive viewership and headlines, the threat of a strike turns into background noise. Symbolic, yes, but powerless. And it's not just about Nike. The alternative leagues try to offer something different, like unrivaled, haven't moved the needle. They can't. The viewership isn't there. The momentum isn't there. And most importantly, they rely on WNBA stars to bring any attention at all. The idea that they could replace the WNBA as a viable platform? That's not real. Because here's what is real. The WNBA's unique ecosystem. Its built-in rivalries. Its team loyalties. Its expanding audience. The drama and history that only this league can provide. You can't replicate that overnight, and everyone knows it, especially the players. Angel Reese has been playing an elite level, silencing critics with her performance and turning casuals into believers. Her commitment to the upcoming season just reinforces what Clark already said. This season is happening, no matter what. And that's the trap the WNBPA walked into. They tried to assert authority through threat, only to be steamrolled by reality. Because in 2026, the WNBA doesn't revolve around union leadership. It revolves around its 5 biggest stars and their sponsors. The players will still get that massive raise. The 700% bump will happen. But it won't be because the union backed the league into a corner. It'll be because the league can't afford not to pay its stars. The league needs them on the court. The fans expect them on the court. And the brands? They've already invested in them being there. That's the new math. The union tried to play a 20th century game in a 21st century league. And it shows. Their leverage isn't built on player solidarity anymore. It's built on whether the right players are on board. And this time, they weren't. So what happens now? The union has to regroup. Rethink its place in a league where power has decentralized. Because while their goals may still be valid, fair pay, better conditions, long-term security, their tactics need a serious update. This isn't just a labor dispute. It's a wake-up call. The balance of power in the WNBA has shifted. Star players and corporate money now move the league more than any internal vote. Caitlin Clark didn't wait for a negotiation outcome. She made one irrelevant. Her post was quiet, but it was definitive. A signal that fans, players, and sponsors could rally behind. The season is happening. The union's threat has been neutralized, and the conversation has moved on without them. So what do you think? Did the union overplay its hand? Was Clark's post the turning point that ended the strike talk for good? Should the WNBPA rethink how it operates in a league driven by player influence and corporate dollars? Drop your take in the comments. Share this with someone who's been following the WNBA saga. Hit like if you're hyped for the 2026 season, and subscribe to stay locked in as this story keeps unfolding. Because this league isn't just growing, it's evolving. Fast. And the ripple effects? They're already here. Because what Caitlin Clark did wasn't just disrupt a negotiation. It exposed the union's weak spot. She didn't call a press conference. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't even name the WNBPA. But the meaning was loud and clear. If you're betting on a strike, you're already on the losing side. The real action? It's happening courtside. And she invited everyone in. That's the kind of move you don't recover from overnight if you're the WNBPA. They'd spent months building momentum, rallying behind the idea of collective power, floating the possibility of sitting out the most high-stakes season the league's ever seen. But the second the face of the league gave that subtle, confident nod, it was over. This wasn't a glitch in the union strategy. This was a full-on reality check. Because here's what no one in leadership wants to admit. Their grip on the narrative on the locker room, even on the labor action itself, was slipping the moment the season became too big to stop. When you've got Nike pouring money into Super Bowl ad slots and a signature shoe launch, and your top players are being built into marketing campaigns with national reach, you don't just walk away. You don't strike. Especially when the fans are watching, the media is waiting, and the sponsors are locked in. And that's exactly where things went sideways for the union. The optics are brutal. When you threaten a strike and your 5 most valuable players immediately act like that threat doesn't exist, what does that say about your leverage? Your unity? Your relevance? It says what everyone is now thinking. The WNBA isn't driving this bus anymore. Clark, Reese, Buchers, Wilson, Ionescu, they aren't just playing basketball. They're driving revenue. They're dictating tone. They're shaping the future of the league in real time. Their influence, their voices, their brands are now bigger than the machinery trying to steer them. And Nike? Nike saw this coming a mile away. They didn't build a marketing blitz around a player who might miss her rookie season. They didn't schedule a shoe launch on the biggest TV day in America without knowing the product. Caitlin Clark on the court was guaranteed. Nike's not in the habit of gambling on labor standoffs. That launch is locked in, ad buys are set, production is done. Pulling the plug isn't an option. So when Clark posted, "Both are welcome courtside this year," it wasn't optimism. It was coordination. It was certainty. And it was backed by enough money to bulldoze any union strategy trying to push back. That's the fundamental power shift this entire saga has revealed. This isn't the early 2000s WNBA, where players had limited outside opportunities and the union was the primary mouthpiece for collective change. This is a league now orbiting around corporate deals, media narratives, and the unstoppable momentum of marketable, magnetic talent. And the union's playbook? It hasn't kept up. They operated like a strike threat would be enough. That solidarity would win out. That the image of collective resistance would force the league to cave. But what happens when that solidarity cracks? What happens when the players most crucial to your leverage decide to go rogue? Publicly? What happens when fans start ignoring union statements in favor of Instagram captions and shoot-around interviews? You get a union left talking to itself while everyone else moves on. The WNBA didn't just lose leverage. They lost the ability to control the conversation. And without that, they're just reacting, scrambling to frame a 97% strike vote as meaningful, even when the biggest names in the sport are making it irrelevant in real time. And sure, the union will get something out of this. The pay raise is still happening. A 700% increase isn't nothing. But let's be honest, it's not because the strike threat worked. It's because the league, the sponsors, and the fans all recognize what's at stake. You don't need a union ultimatum to understand the cost of sidelining a product this valuable, especially when that product is tied to Caitlin Clark and the most commercially viable season in league history. If anything, the raise was inevitable. The WNBA can't justify paying its stars pennies anymore. Not when the entire league's financial narrative is shifting. Not when players like Angel Reese are drawing record-breaking crowds and sponsorship deals on their own. Not when networks are negotiating new rights packages and merch is flying off the shelves. This wasn't a labor win. It was a market correction. And now the union is stuck in a brutal position. They can't walk back the strike threat without looking weak. They can't push forward without losing the players who matter most. They can't claim full credit for the pay raise without acknowledging the outside pressure that really forced it. So they're left with vague statements, behind-the-scenes meetings, and a slow fade from the spotlight. Meanwhile, the players? They're thriving. They made their choice. They're all in on the 2026 season. Because this isn't just about basketball. It's about legacy, opportunity, brand growth, and career-defining moments. Angel Reese's elite performance is already changing the conversation around her. She's not just a media personality anymore. She's delivering. And her full commitment to the season only solidifies that her priorities are in sync with what the league needs right now. Focus, visibility, and consistency. Paige Buchers? She's coming in hot, with a built-in audience and a high-profile debut that will only magnify this moment. Aya Wilson continues to be the foundation, reliable, respected, and already part of the legacy. And Sabrina Ionescu? Her star continues to rise with every season. This core group didn't just kill the strike. They rebuilt the league's center of gravity. Not with speeches, not with statements, but with presence. They showed up, they spoke up, and they kept the momentum moving forward. And fans? They've noticed. They're not worried about a season delay. They're not glued to union updates. They're talking about games, matchups, rookie debuts. They're already watching preseason content, and they're buying tickets, merch, and the hype. The strike is already a memory, and the season hasn't even started. So what happens next? The WNBA will have to answer that. Quietly, without the megaphone it hoped to control. Its future role now depends on whether it can adapt, whether it can find ways to work with the players who now hold the power, instead of trying to control them. Because the illusion that the union leads from the front, that's gone. This story was never really about labor versus management. It was about momentum versus obstruction. And Caitlin Clark, backed by $1 billion machine and supported by a unified front of star players, made sure nothing got in the way. So where does that leave the league? Stronger, sharper, more focused. And where does that leave the union? Well, figuring it out. Here's the part that stings the most for the union. This could have been their moment. On paper, everything was lined up. A once-in-a-generation pay raise was on the table. The national spotlight was finally locked on the WNBA. The new wave of stars, Clark, Reese, Buchers, were about to launch the league into an entirely different stratosphere. This was the time to make a statement. The time to assert that players had control. That the league didn't just need them, it revolved around them. And the union tried to say that. With the 97% strike authorization vote, they tried to project strength. But what they didn't realize, or didn't want to admit, is that the center of gravity had already shifted. The message may have been unified, but the execution was fractured. Because the players the league actually listens to had other priorities. Bigger ones. More immediate ones. No matter how tight the union tried to hold the line, the truth was right there on social media, in interviews, in sponsorship rollouts. The stars weren't just planning to show up. They were already promoting the season like the strike wasn't even real. And when the most visible, most followed, most marketable faces of your sport are publicly ignoring your biggest bargaining chip, that's not just undermining the union strategy, it's erasing it. Caitlin Clark didn't say, "The strike won't happen." She didn't need to. She said, "Both are welcome courtside this year." And with those 10 words, she reframed the entire conversation. The 2026 season wasn't in question. The games weren't at risk. The league was happening, and she wasn't alone. Angel Reese doubled down in the most subtle, effective way possible by talking about playoff goals. Not hypotheticals. Not if the season happens. Not once negotiations are resolved. She was already in the postseason mindset. That level of confidence, that certainty, it vaporized any tension the union was still trying to build. And here's the kicker. This wasn't defiance. It wasn't rebellion. It was alignment with reality, with money, with momentum. These women are building global brands. They're not waiting around to see if a labor standoff pans out. They're not risking a breakout year, a signature shoe, a record-breaking rookie debut on the off chance that a prolonged strike gets them a marginally better deal. They already know the truth. The raise is coming. The money is there. And their individual leverage is far more powerful than any union vote. Nike didn't build a Super Bowl rollout around a CBA clause. They built it around Caitlin Clark. Period. And that level of investment, that level of exposure, it doesn't get paused for anyone. The union's threat, though dramatic, wasn't built for this version of the WNBA. It was built for a league that no longer exists. A league where the biggest leverage the players had was to walk out. But in 2026, the biggest leverage is being in the game. Because showing up means securing long-term brand equity. It means fans stay invested. It means sponsors stay engaged. Sitting out might make a statement, sure, but playing, performing, winning, that builds careers. That grows the league. That cashes checks. And whether union leadership likes it or not, that's the calculation the stars have already made. So now, the WNBA has a massive problem. Their message doesn't hold the same weight. Their strategy doesn't spark the same fear. And their grip on the league's direction, it's slipping through their fingers. And the fallout isn't just internal. The league saw it. The sponsors saw it. The fans definitely saw it. The union took their biggest swing and it whiffed. Not because the issue wasn't important. Not because the players don't deserve better. But because their strongest allies didn't show up for the fight. And now, that silence is echoing louder than anything the union could say. Even the alternative leagues, unrivaled being the loudest among them, aren't stepping into the void. Because they can't. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the rivalries. They don't have the history. Most importantly, they don't have the audience. They rely on the WNBA's gravitational pull to remain relevant. And if the WNBA stopped for even a second, the ripple effects wouldn't strengthen unrivaled. They collapse it. You can't build independence on borrowed stardom. So if the players strike, everyone loses. The union knew that, but they moved forward with the vote anyway. Not because they believed they could win a war, but because they thought the threat alone would do the job. But when Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Sabrina Ionescu, Aya Wilson, and Paige Buchers essentially shrugged off the threat, the illusion shattered. Fans stopped worrying. Networks stopped speculating. The story moved on. And that's the legacy risk. Because now the union looks out of step with the players they claim to represent. Worse, they look weaker than the league they're supposed to be challenging. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth. In 2026, the real power doesn't sit in negotiations or labor committees. It sits in group chats between 5 women with more reach than the WNBPA's entire media operation. It sits in Nike headquarters. It sits in the hands of players who understand that the new way to drive change isn't by sitting out. It's by showing up and taking over. The raise will come. The league will grow. The visibility will skyrocket. But the union won't be the reason why. And that's going to be hard to recover from. So what now? The union has 2 choices. They can double down, claim symbolic victory, and pretend this went according to plan. Or they can adapt, accept that the landscape has changed, that their role isn't to dictate, but to amplify. But the players who hold the keys to the league's future don't want to burn it down. They want to own it. That's the direction this is headed. The players aren't just employees anymore. They're brands. They're partners. And if the union doesn't adjust to that dynamic, they'll keep getting left behind. The WNBA's future isn't being negotiated behind closed doors. It's being broadcast, game by game, post by post, deal by deal. And the fans? They're watching it unfold in real time. What do you think? Did Caitlin Clark just end the strike before it even began? Is the WNBPA still necessary in a league now run by superstar influence and corporate investments? Or is this just a momentary shift before the balance of power resets? Let us know down in the comments. If you're following every twist of the WNBA labor drama, hit that like button, send this to a friend who's still waiting on union updates, and make sure to subscribe, because we're not just watching basketball anymore. We're watching a power struggle disguised as a season, and it's only just getting started.